Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, where we are lucky enough to be joined by one of our industry experts, Ben Hancock from NiCE. NiCE are one of our gold sponsors here, supporting the industry right across Australia. Session today is exploring the contact centre paradox, and it's going to give us the opportunity to really explore the real-world complexities of human-centred approaches to modern contact centres and modernising the operations that we have. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, we hope the session provides some interesting insights. We're going to hear some real strong thought leadership from Ben and give you some insights into things that are actually within your control and things that you really need to sort of build into your decision making. There will be a prize for the best question asked, and Ben, you are going to be the judge of the best question.
Absolutely.
So, ask lots of those. And to round off the session, we'll have Q&A at the end. But any of you who come along to these sessions will know that if you've got a question or a thought or a comment, throw it in the QA or the chat feature in Zoom, and we'll ask it if it's relevant as we go, rather than waiting to the very end. I'm Fran Southwood, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. We'll just run through some general housekeeping with you. Remember to get the most out of the session. The opportunity is for you to interact and to ask those questions of Ben. Think better than having experts literally on the line to answer those questions for you. So there's no need to take too many notes, as we'll give you the recording of the webinar post the session. And if Ben's got any slides that we can share with you, we'll send them through then as well. As I said, use that Q&A button on the control panel. I always forget the great questions unless I write them down. So make sure as you think of something, or if it is relevant to what's being talked about, you type it as we go. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and have any issues with the connection, utilise that raise hand button on the panel, and one of the team will jump in and try and help. Alternatively, you can revert to the registration email where you've got the dial-in number details that you can tap into there. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to introduce our speaker for today from NiCE, Ben Hancock. Ben is the Manager Customer Service Automation at NiCE. Ben, we've been seeing lots around social media and in the press around all of the activity of NiCE going on. So I'm sure that all of that is keeping you plenty busy with new partners, new opportunities, and all of the excitement that comes with that. I'm going to hand over to you to get the ball rolling on today's session.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fran, and thank you everybody for joining. It's a really great opportunity to speak to all of you today and share some lessons that we've learned in the field with our customers. One thing I will say up front is, for those that have been paying attention, NiCE has been on a bit of a journey recently of partnership, of reaching out to other organizations, of really strengthening our market position through partnerships with Snowflake, with AWS, more recently with ServiceNow, and of course the new news of the acquisition of Cognigy, which is currently going through regulatory review, as is required through all mergers and acquisitions. So unfortunately today I won't be able to talk about that in any great level of detail. I'm sure that some of the Q&A cues will be related to the Cognigy acquisition. Until that's all finalized and completely finished and done with, I can't really talk about it. And anything that is official will be communicated out through all of our public pipes. So sorry to burst anyone's bubble if they wanted to ask questions about that. More will come to light in the next month or so, I'd say. So let me just whip up the screen share here. So there's a bit of a paradox happening in the world of customer service right now. And I want to sort of set the scene before I go into what that paradox is. And I've got a few lessons to share from our dealings with customers, and actually through the voice of one of our customers as well. So we're going to go through a little bit of that. Who is NiCE for those that don't know in the market? Hopefully you're at the very least, you're aware of who we are. And then we'll go through 4 key lessons as well as the brass tacks. I will call out that I had to Google whether it was brass tacks, TACKS or TAX. It's something I've always said and known the meaning of, but never actually written down. So, we will talk about some of the results of this kind of transformation too. But let me dig in. So we're talking about contact center, right? And the idea of people representing organizations and taking calls and having conversations on behalf of an organization is not a new concept, right? We've got 150 years of voice-related customer service that we have to deal with. And before times, a lot of that was related and limited by a certain number of things, right? Our human intelligence can only take us so far. We only had so many people that we could hire. We only had so much physical space that we could occupy. We had very specific silos. Conversations started and finished with a certain agent in a certain team that did a certain thing. And we everything was synchronous. And we had a number of best of breed point solutions, right? That was the past, and we all know that world really, really well. And then along came things like digital and AI, and we started to enhance our own human intelligence with artificial intelligence. We started to use bots to really augment what our people could do. We started to be more proactive instead of just reactive. And we started to blend front office and back office and middle office roles and being able to create things like team of experts or community of experts style working arrangements in our contact centers. And we moved from sort of individual best of breed point solutions to more of a platform play. And we've been going through that kind of transformation as an industry for a number of years, which is all very good, right? But there are certain things that this breeds, right? It breeds a sense of urgency, of complexity, and rising pressure to deliver very personalized, faster experiences for our customers, right? If we consider, the likes of Uber and DoorDash and Menulog and all of these, as a service type of organizations that we deal with on a daily basis, everything is hyper personalized. It's very much in the moment. And that can be very difficult for many organizations to compete with from a customer service perspective. When we sort of zoom out a little bit, we've kind of got these 2 big forces at play in the market. We have AI, which is absolutely changing the world when it comes to not only customer service, but also many other industries as well. But at the same time, we really still appreciate that human contact, right? And these are the things that are driving a lot of the growth in the customer service market. It's absolutely something that NiCE holds at its core. And, we're not the only ones saying this. Of course, McKinsey and Company, Deloitte and others are all bringing out reports on how AI and humans are working together for the future of customer service. Gartner also has a perspective on this, of course. By 2029, we'll see, up to 80% of inquiries being managed by agentic AI. Personally, we're working on many agentic AI solutions within NiCE. We've actually released some already. It's a big enabler as far as the augmented workforce. And we're seeing cost reductions, potentially of 30%, across an entire org, which is a huge amount of money. However, on the flip side of that, really the underpinning of this paradox is that we still want to contact humans, right? We still want to speak to people when things are complex or sophisticated. Maybe it's a highly emotionally charged situation, or it's very complex. Maybe I'm applying for a mortgage and I've got questions. And we know that 70% of customers feel very frustrated when they can't get through to a human when they really feel like they need to. So we've got these 2 paradigms, right? We've got AI for scale and cost reduction, and we can deploy thousands of AI agents to do thousands of different things. But we also have humans for empathy and problem solving, right? We still want to be able to speak to somebody when we've got a fraudulent charge on our credit card or something that's gone really wrong with our order. We want somebody to really understand our issue and help us out. So from a NiCE perspective, the way we bridge that is through what we call workforce augmentation. And this is not a new concept, right? Over time, we've seen organizations, move from being completely manual to start adopting software and tools, right? That gave us more efficiency. Then we saw the explosion of virtual agents, bots, self-service, automation. That also gave us more efficiency. And where we are now is how do we blend the human with the AI to be able to really ramp up our ability to service our customers, but also ensure that our agents and our employees, that we're not just leaving them in the dust, right? We're not relying on bots to do all of the work. We want to make sure we're augmenting the employees that we have. We're giving them capabilities to make them more efficient and more effective. So that's really the scene setting. Now, I'll get in trouble for marketing if I don't do a little bit about who is NiCE. They're on the call, and I will absolutely get in trouble if I don't go through who NiCE are, just at a very high level. So our approach to market is, how do we help our customers automate their customer service across workflows, agents, and knowledge? Now, when we zoom in a little bit and we have a look at what that capability platform looks like, that's across things like workforce augmentation, which I was just explaining. Orchestration, making sure that the right thing goes to the right person at the right time, through the right channel, and for the right reasons, right? There's a lot of things that we have to keep into consideration there. And then, of course, service automation, right? So where we do feel like we need to automate a flow end to end, how do we do that in a way that's the best for the organization? Things across capability across journey mapping and workflow design, all the way through to our Copilot. Nothing to do with Microsoft, by the way, Fran. I know that we get that question a lot. Our Copilot is our Copilot, nothing to do with Microsoft. And then that's across things like workflows. So how do I get something done? Agents, whether they're AIs or humans, or knowledge, right? So whether that's knowledge from an FAQ or a product knowledge perspective, or whether that's knowledge about a customer themselves. As far as our local customers, speaking of that, we have over, well, I think we've just cracked 320 in the market, which is fantastic when you consider that only in 2019, I think we had 6 customers locally in Australia and New Zealand. So we've seen immense growth over the last 6 or so years. And some of the people on this call may see their logo on this slide as well. We're very proud of all of the customers that we work with. Some of these customers will be attending and presenting at our upcoming interactions events as well, across Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland, and Adelaide. So we can share those dates at the end of the session as well. But today, I'm really going to focus on one customer that really helped us lead the charge locally. They were the first customer in the whole of APAC to deploy our auto summarization capabilities when it first launched in December 2023. And they've also helped us really lead a number of new capabilities and been a forward-looking customer as far as how to adopt and use technology to really augment their workforce. And I'll share some really cool stories from them along the journey. I sat down with Wayne Anderson, who is the General Manager of Digital Delivery at 2 Degrees. For those that don't know, 2 Degrees is a challenger telco in New Zealand. They were a merger of 2 Degrees and Orcon. They had a number of disparate systems that they had to figure out how those things work together. And right now, they've got around about 450 to 500 agents on the CX1 Mpower platform. They've gone through a knowledge transformation, moving 9 different knowledge bases into a single CX1 expert knowledge management platform. They've delivered auto summarization. They're using our interaction analytics capability. They are really driving the utilization of their CX1 platform and learning a lot of lessons about how that gets rolled out and how it is made successful. So I'll dive right in, and after each lesson, I'll take a minute to see if there's questions, Fran, and maybe we can go through them in a bit of detail. I'll try to get through these quickly because I know that it's a busy day for all of us on a Tuesday. But let's kick in. So it's not a technology project, right? And this is coming from somebody who works for a software platform, right? The success and failure of these capabilities is not thinking about it as a tech upgrade. Right? When we think about transformation, we jump into the tools. We need to go to cloud. We need to leverage AI. We need to do more automation. But the ones that we see that stick, they actually start with people, right? And Wayne put it beautifully when he was talking about this, is that even with the best technology, old habits in organizations die hard, right? So changing tools is really easy compared to shifting mindsets. I'm sure that there's many people on this call that have been around since green screens, right? When we knew exactly tab F4 and F5 and what our different keyboard shortcuts used to do, and we could navigate that easily so quickly. And then we got a click and point graphical user interface, and we had to relearn how to do everything from scratch. Right. So that's a big mindset shift. And that change management is a really key point when we think about transformation.
Would have
And
seen plenty of examples in the market where the investment and focus has been totally on tech, and
yeah,
actually the failure point and the post event, debrief and postulation is, look at that, it didn't do what it was meant to do. But
mm,
actually what they missed was that whole people change management and actually bringing their people along with them, and the risk to the success of, the overall success of the tech itself is fully compromised by not paying enough attention to that people role.
100%, Fran. And I think that the people role that you bring up, it's a really nice little dovetail here, is that role has actually changed. I used to be an agent. Many people on this call used to be an agent, right? Back in the day, really, ultimately, we were script followers and we were process completers, right? There wasn't a whole lot of autonomy there. And that was mostly due to the fact we had a lot of people in a contact center that could get the work done, right? But that role is changing now, right? We expect our agents to be problem solvers. We expect them to be empathetic. We expect them to be tech enabled. And when we're delivering new capabilities to these agents, we're taking away a lot of the drudgery and the admin that we had to do in the past and allowing the humans to actually be more human, right? The challenge with that is that the resource profile needs to change. So I asked Wayne, what does that resource profile look like moving forward? And from his perspective, it's curiosity, comfort with AI, and emotional intelligence are the things that he looks for. Whereas back in the day, we used to look for more as it's IQ and it's process, it's PQ, it's process ability, it's can you follow the process start to finish, are you compliant, all those sorts of things. A lot of that goes away because we've got automation that can do that work now. But what we do need, because what large language models can't do, is be empathetic. It can't necessarily solve problems like humans can yet, right? Maybe in the future it can.
I think it's
And
also timely, given that's also, if you think about the profile of employees,
yes, yeah, we're
everything we're
looking at
seeing leads to the fact that actually that's what they're looking for as well. They don't want to be number. They don't want to just process. They
yeah,
want to be empowered. So it kind of makes sense,
100%.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of the time, contact centers are filled with people who are going through university or straight out of high school, or looking for job opportunities that they start in the contact center and go to a different part of an organization. Or we see it skewed also towards sort of the older generation who, need that flexibility with work for kids, or, maybe they're semi-retired and they don't want to work in an office anymore. We get the whole gamut of people in a contact center, right? It's not one type of resource profile. But we actually see that leaders in the contact center are underestimating how impactful that cultural shift is, right? And 94% of leaders believe that soft skills, right, on a contact center call or messaging conversation impacts CSAT, and only 60% actually measure that, right? And as we start to think about what this means from a key takeaway perspective, if you don't invest in hearts and minds, this is Wayne's quote, and I love it. All you've done is modernize the interface of a legacy mindset. So basically, we're putting a shiny new face on the exact old ways that we were doing things in the past. So my practical tip for lesson number 1, ask yourself not just what tools that you're deploying, but actually how you're preparing people to thrive with those tools, right? What kind of education are you doing? How are you bringing them on the journey? It's not something that we just want to drop in and go, here you go, guys, you've got a new thing to use. How do we actually bring them on that journey? Maybe we can get them involved in the design process. Maybe we can ask them where the gaps are and what's frustrating them, right? And I'll talk about that in the second lesson. But I'll pause there to see if there's any questions, Fran.
No questions, but we'll encourage people to throw them in there. But I think the last part of your little takeaway there, really important. Again, if you're not also then overhauling, and I know we're going to go into process overhaul, but even the traditional frameworks that you have that assess and
Mm,
review and analyze and measure, like even your basic contact center frameworks, if they are not adjusted, again, you're measuring people the same way that you used to, but for a whole new set of expectations that you're actually building into them. And the mismatch, and we hear that one of the biggest reasons that attrition for some organizations is still one of the biggest challenges is because the promise in that EVP, your value proposition as an organization is not met when they then join the organization. So lots of promises and assertions about how you will be empowered and trusted to actually get on and be a decision maker. They get in there and the rigidity of old school frameworks that actually say, well, yeah, that's all good and well, but actually how we measure you is not going to be lined up with that. So, it's got to be a holistic overview and pain.
Completely agree. And that's such a good segue right into the second lesson. And these things, I'm not going to say these are not unique challenges, right? But these are the sorts of things that at NiCE we try to embed as part of our pre-sales journey, post-sales journey, and ongoing support, right? When you engage with our team, this is the kind of experience we want to help bring to the table. We don't just want to drop in a piece of software and walk away, right? It's not really how we build long-term relationships. So from a Sony perspective, right? Obviously, big, well-known brand. They focused a lot on understanding the volume of their calls to really understand what was happening in their contact center to then approach automation, right? So doing that analysis first before they started doing automation, they knew that they wanted to drive volume out of the contact center, but they didn't necessarily know which intents or which journeys were going to be the best. So, they found that over 40% of their customer inquiry calls were highly automatable. And then they started ticking them off one by one. And this is an older slide now, but they're well over 16% of process containment through their self-service IVR using NiCE. And so what I would say as a practical tip on this point is actually pressure test those journeys, right? So what's actually adding value for customers? Have you reviewed your IVR tree in the last couple of years? Do you have a number of different options that are confusing and difficult to understand? We had a customer recently that had to go through, I think it was 160 different options by starting at the first level and going all the way down through and mapping how it all looked and understanding where the gaps were and what actually needed to be there. And what's wasting agent time? Like, to your point, those rigid structures and frameworks that we make agents follow, what are they actually achieving, right? Are we actually getting value from those things? Because
We
yeah,
sometimes,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we sometimes see organizations have a very internal view of the answers to those questions you asked. Where do you see organizations doing well in relation to engaging customers, externals, stakeholders, etc., in that conversation? Because again, I know an organization that decided their customers needed a particular landing place that would have a newsroom type function. And they spent a whole lot of money designing this solution. It's going to be amazing. Internally, it won awards left, right, and center. Nobody came because actually customers didn't want it. So where are you seeing really good, engagement and, insights being drawn from with organizations, and at what point are they working with consumers and customers to really understand that need or experience customers are after?
Yeah, such a good question, right? And I think what a lot of organizations maybe fail to realize is that they have 100% first-party consensual data from their customers in the form of call recordings and transcripts, right? We know that post-call surveys and episodic NPS and relationship-based surveys are good, but they can't form the complete basis of your understanding of your customer base, right? Typically we see somewhere between 15, maybe 20% responses to surveys, and that's, maybe up to 30 or 40%. But it's not representative of the entire cohort of customers. And typically, at least in my personal experience, it's either a very, very happy customer that gives you tens across the board, or it's a very, very unhappy customer that gives you zeros across the board. And then you figure out somewhere in between, you go, I think we're about 50%, right? call recordings and transcripts and emails and messaging conversations, that is first party consensual data that customers are telling you what their frustrations are, where they wish they could be doing things. I wish I could do this. I tried to do that. It didn't work. Why don't you just have this feature? Why don't you just have that service? All of that gold is in your transcripts, right? So if you can't mine that and understand that, most organizations have that locked away in a basement for compliance reasons, right? They're not looking at it. They don't have resources. They don't have the right tool or the right processes. But that's where I would start. And funnily enough, you ask that because Wayne at 2 Degrees, they thought they had their call routing nailed down, right? And when they started using analytics within NiCE, and they started looking at the transcripts, they started pulling out trending analysis. We started presenting them with a number of different, insights across different, metrics, different, views that they wanted to take on their data. They actually found that their call routing was actively working against their customer experience. One of the ideas that they had was around ID and V, and they found that there was the language in the IVR was too formal and it was freaking people out. So they weren't doing the ID and V when they wanted them to, even though it would have been more efficient, right? So they had to just change some wording, made it seem, a bit more friendly. And all of a sudden they started seeing improvements in people who were to ID and Ving themselves in the IVR, right? So to your point, all of the goals you need is in your interactions with your customers, right? They are telling you what their problems are. They're telling you what opportunities they think you should take. And so from a big perspective, we see these organizations that are investing in omnichannel, but they're not doing it well, right? And it's because it's a challenge. If we put in a new tool, effectively, it feels like we're putting a fresh golden link in a broken chain, right? So using an analytical tool, being able to leverage what you've got in transcripts and the previous experiences with customers, that's where we need to start from, right? What quantitative and qualitative data we have access to, and how do we build a business case off that to solve the problems that we can identify, rather than, to your point, building a brand new self-service portal or a brand new landing page or service or product, whatever it is, because we think it's going to work, and actually focusing on what our customers are telling us is going to help them be more happy. Now, just to touch on omnichannel, right? Because I think there can be a bit of confusion where, I've seen this where customers will go out, they'll, whether it's NiCE or another platform, they'll say, we've got multi-channel, omni-channel capabilities. Let's go and we'll expose 5 different channels and we'll get everything working. And all of a sudden it causes what we would call channel bloat, right? And so omni-channel doesn't mean every channel everywhere all the time. Again, we can leverage our analytics to understand where people would prefer to be contacting us on. Typically, email is one of those things that we have as a fallback. But if we know that our demographic is using Instagram and Facebook, why wouldn't we have those channels, right? Because that's where our customers are. So I would argue that 3 or 4 well-orchestrated channels beats having more channels, right? And so even if that means starting, if you're a voice-only organization right now, or voice and email right now, and you're wondering about additional channels, start with web messaging, start with web chat, start with Facebook Messenger, and slowly but surely add more channels, and potentially even start to advertise those channels to your customers, right? So, hey, you don't have to call us anymore. You can actually message us and you'll get the same level or better of a service than what you would expect through the voice channel. I don't have to wait around for somebody to answer the phone. I can sort of manage this like I would a conversation with my friends or family, right? So, but going immediately to market with 5 or 6 different channels and not having the operational rhythm behind that from a people and process perspective is just going to cause more frustration for your customers, right? So that's a really big, one big takeaway from me is making sure that we focus on orchestration rather than quantity. So just a couple of takeaways for this one, and then we can move on to lesson 3. First one is pressure test your processes, right? So understand and be very objective about this, right? Are the processes in your organization right now adding complexity, or are they adding value, or are they unnecessary completely? Right. And that could be done through a number of factors, right? It could be an analytics approach where we look at a basic quantity and we understand where the frustrations are using some tools, or maybe it's interviewing some agents and saying, what frustrates you about your job, right? What kind of things are you doing that's administrative work that you don't think adds much value? How hard is it for you to access knowledge as you're moving through a process, right? How much time do you feel like you spend looking for answers to questions that your customers ask you? And secondly, prioritize orchestration of a journey over just channel count. I cannot stress this enough. If you know where your customers are, make sure you've got a channel that suits them, but really think about how you want your agents to service those channels and orchestrate a journey from end to end, maybe starting in digital, and then we move through to an agent, or maybe we've got a bot to an agent and then a post-call email with a summary. If that's the way you want to start, that's great. But there's many different formats that we can take when it comes to orchestrating omnichannel, but more channels does not equal better. Orchestration equals better. Pause there, Fran.
And I'm just going to throw in a couple of points there. I think we need to remember that we've often just got one chance to get it right. So your comments there about make sure that the optimization of those channels is already kind of worked through before you just throw them into the market. Because again, a poor experience, so often dissatisfaction is a far more important thing to understand than satisfaction.
Yes.
Because of its impact on you
Yes.
as an organization and your customer base. Secondly, I cannot tell you the amount of organizations I see that deploy new technology, new systems, and literally do the old lift and shift. They lift every single part of their old school, often aged thinking, as far as practices, processes, even workflow, right? They literally pick it up, they drop it into a new system, and everybody scratches their head and says, well, why isn't it giving us the ROI we thought? Or why are we not getting deflection? Or why are we not getting any savings in the processing of the workflow component? It's because you're still just doing it all, like you said earlier, on some shiny, great new technology, but actually your practices are still what's pulling you down. So the opportunity to actually redesign first is a great, ultimate starting point, but it's never too late. So again, utilize the data in the system. If you've had to go on the fly and do a lift and shift, there are still great opportunities with the data, but you've got to actually be prepared to do it. Quite often we move on so quickly to the next thing. We move on to, right, what's next? Now we're going to put in some, AI support. Now we're going to do phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4. Never still coming back to that optimized interaction, optimized service, etc. And we're missing such opportunities. Again, we might have great automation, but actually we don't need that interaction to even occur. So don't just automate it, eliminate it.
100%.
So again, we push organizations to go back and really start looking at, what are you designing, and how can you design out the things that you're currently focused on automating?
Absolutely agree. And I think, data in most organizations is the most underused asset. And, we hear data is the new oil and we hear all these sayings, but in reality, right, most leaders, 95% of leaders say that data-driven insights are critical, but only like less than 40% actually trust the analytical tool that they're currently using, right? So we need more data. We need to understand this. We need to understand that, but they don't actually trust the tools that they have to give them that insight, right? So big focus for us is around analytics and ensuring that we actually provide outputs and insights that are actually usable. And we've really invested a lot in the platform to make that work. But when we asked Wayne, how has data changed the way you approach the business, right? And making changes. And his answer was very, I love this, right? Yes, 1,000 times yes, right? Now that we have the data, now that we're using interaction analytics, now that we've got a platform that allows us to start broad and get very specific, they've moved from gut feel, to your point, the organization that created a news landing page that didn't work because it was probably a gut feel. I think this is going to work for our customers. I think this is what I want. Whereas now it's evidence-based, right? And sometimes they're trade-offs. Sometimes it's, well, we don't really want to do that, but our customers are telling us unequivocally that that's what they want to do, right? So we have to trust what the data is telling us, and we have to remove egos from the room, right? And let the data talk for itself. So I think that's such a big thing to focus on is your data in the right format? Is it clean? Can you access it? Can you analyze it? Of course, from our perspective, we've got great analytical tools. It's what our heritage is as an organization. But regardless, right, is use data to find the small moments that frustrate customers and drain your operational time, not just the big swings, not just the big chatbot that we think is going to save 20, 30% of our volume and automate it away. Whilst I think that's a really sexy thing to do, there's a lot of value that you can find just in the little moments, right? Is there, could we provide a better upfront explanation to customers through our IVR that could save us a minute or two of AHT, which then gives us the business ROI to go and invest in a new, chatbot or voice AI or whatever it might be that is a bigger swing, right? But build the business case based on the little wins and ladder up to the big wins. Because if you take a big swing and it doesn't work and it doesn't pay off, that's a lot more risky than making small changes and seeing the value grow over time.
It
I'm just
also
conscious of time frame.
depletes.
Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
that's cool. It depletes the trust and confidence of your internal exec as well, right?
Yes.
Next time you go to them, it's a little bit like the boy that cried wolf. Ben, we've just got a quick question here from Emily, and she's just asking, and specifically about that multi-channel kind of outreach from customers. What
Mm.
strategies can contact centers implement to reduce customers' need to reach out through multiple channels for the same issue? That I'm frustrated, I've tried on the phones, I've sent you an email, I'm now on social media, and now
Mm.
I'm going to put a complaint in as well. What are some of the strategies that you can do to, number one, identify those? And it probably comes back to your first point you raised about, finding those fracture points anyway, right? But what can you do to, quickly recognize that multi approach from customers?
Yeah, we call that channel surfing, right? So channel surfing is a big problem that many organizations face, particularly when a customer feels that they're in a time of crisis or a very specific acute time of need. You know, this is going to sound like the most obvious answer ever, but having the ability to understand, well, how long has this customer been? How many times has this customer actually contacted us in the last X amount of days or weeks? Is there an open ticket? Is there an open order? Being able to bring multiple different sort of points of data about, say, me as a customer together to understand, well, why might this customer actually be going across these different channels? And is this something that happens a lot in our organization? So if channel surfing is something that happens a lot, then it tells me that there might be more of an upstream breakage in a process or an understanding of a customer that's leading to that point of frustration. If it's a small, we're always going to have outliers, right? There's always going to be those customers that feel entitled to be able to be served within less than 30 seconds, no matter when they contact us. But if it's becoming a statistically significant proportion of your customer base doing it, then it has to be a problem somewhere else, right? Because typically the contact center, once something comes in and once we're in touch with someone, we do our best and we try to resolve it as quickly as we possibly can. But, to me, there's potentially issues with first contact resolution, with agents having to ask customers to repeat themselves, even though they've spoken to us multiple times. So maybe our data mesh isn't sort of coming together. Maybe we can't present that to to agents as effectively as we would like. Potentially there's a knowledge or coaching issue there. And it's not necessarily about preventing the channel surfing. It's about trying to stop the customer from feeling like they have to go down that route in the first place. For me, a big focus is channel of choice. So if a customer has tried to have a conversation with us over Apple Business Messaging or Facebook or WhatsApp, for instance, and we can't resolve it in there or online to a self-service, and they get to a certain point and they say, the website says, for any further help, please call us, right? It kind of defeats the purpose of having an online self-service portal, right? So being able to keep a customer in the channel that they've decided to engage with you on is absolutely going to help reduce channel surfing. And likewise, if we can do things like IVR deflection to, say, WhatsApp or another third-party messaging channel, where we can, take them away from an IVR with a 30-minute queue and put them into an asynchronous channel where we can deal with them in a bit more of a calm way, the real focus from the business needs to be on resolution, right? Once we get them in the channel, it has to be a focus on resolution. And if that means that the AHT goes a little bit higher, that's okay. because we've resolved it in that first interaction, and we avoid the customer feeling like they have to go to multiple channels to get something resolved. So not a very specific answer. There's no sort of silver bullet when it comes to that, but there's a number of different areas that we can investigate to understand where that breakage is coming from and why customers are feeling like they have to channel surf to get things resolved.
Yeah, and Ben, as you said at the beginning, sometimes it's about an organisation's understanding of criticality
Yeah.
and the misalignment of expectations. Customer expects this, we're going to give them this. It might be that we say it's going to be solved in 5 working days. They want it in 3 hours. So
Yeah.
might not necessarily meet. There's got to be that review of understanding of why is it so critical, and do our processes support that from a customer lens.
And these sorts of things are becoming easier, right? Like if we think about what a customer, may present to us, right? Data has a human purpose, right? Through data, we can understand a customer's sentiment. We can understand their history. We can understand what their intent is. Are they vulnerable? Are they experiencing financial hardship, right? We now got the concept of short and long-term memory about customers. So Fran, if you tell me that you're going to Wet and Wild Water World, and the next time you contact me, I ask you, how was your trip up to the Gold Coast, right? Did you have fun, right? These sorts of things that we can understand a lot about a customer just from what they tell us, but then how we interpret that into processes and usable information. But on the agent side as well, this data has a purpose for coaching, for knowledge improvements, for workflow management, for compliance purposes. And that's the thing that connects us, right? So I've worked in contact centers for a long time. I used to be an agent, as many people did. I've got to ask the question, right? Are we measuring the right things, right? And are we actually using AHT and FCR and ACW and NTT and whatever other, metrics that we've got? Are we using them to actually improve our service, or are we using them to just measure, right? There's going to be a big focus as we automate more and as we augment more. The really hard conversations are going to end up with the humans, right? We're not going to get the little 1-2 minute, quick, easy FAQ, general kind of inquiry type questions that we can answer really quickly, give us our brain a break. Everything that comes to humans in the contact center is going to be more difficult. It's going to be, more complex, more sophisticated. So we're going to have to really understand that maybe AHT is no longer the measure of an efficient contact center, right? It will still be for a while as we go through this transformation as an industry, but maybe it's not meant to be in the future. Maybe it needs to be something else. Maybe it needs to be contact resolution, or it needs to be, CSAT, or it needs to be something else that is a metric that we can trust. Because I think the big focus on time really drives maybe the wrong behavior in some cases, where
Absolutely.
it then does lead to an agent trying to hit their KPIs and keep everyone happy, but the customer ends up, having to call back 3 times for something that if the agent had spent maybe an extra 5 or 10 minutes on, might have avoided the second and third call, right? So data is there and it can tell us the answers to many of these questions, but we do have to know what kind of questions to ask. So I just want to whip through this last section quickly, Fran, if I can, because I want to get down to brass tacks and kind of talk about how 2 Degrees actually saw the value turn into ROI for them through this process. Technology is absolutely not the savior, right? It is the enabler. We see a lot of organizations that kind of look a little bit like this, the Frankenstein problem. You've got a chatbot over here, a CRM over there, you've got an IVR upgrade, you've got an analytics tool that doesn't, that has to sit across multiple systems. And the challenge is that, it really brings out, the real issue that 80% of top performing contact centers prioritize integration over just adding tools, right? And where we see gaps, we just add another tool. Or we don't have a good business intelligence layer, so let's add Tableau, or let's add Power BI, or maybe there's something that we can just add on top of this that'll fix all of our issues. But ultimately what it does is it causes more complexity, and the systems have to work together. Now, the little bit of a pitch from me is that this is our approach, right? From a NiCE perspective, our approach is absolutely an open ecosystem. Everything is powered by hubs within NiCE. So if you've got an existing enterprise ecosystem, we're not saying you have to replace all of that to be able to leverage NiCE. We've got 11 hubs. Many of these have pre-built integrations with most of the platforms that you'd expect to see. And we're now also focusing on how knowledge really powers the way that we solve customer inquiries. So I have seen so many examples of organizations that deliver a chatbot or a voice bot and then turn it off after a few weeks because it's not working properly, or it's broken, or it's hallucinated, or it's provided the wrong answer, right? Like that is becoming a regular occurrence where customers now feel scared, or organizations feel scared to deploy chatbots because they're worried about what's going to happen. So our approach is, maybe let's focus on the human first. How do we provide them with knowledge? How do we use the agents to train our knowledge AI, to train our knowledge base, to improve the knowledge gaps and find where there's issues before we actually start handing that over to AI to manage, on its own, right? Agentic AI is really quite interesting and transformative. Most organizations I'm speaking to are looking at it from it's novel, it's new, it's something I want to understand. I think that we have some business case for it, but it's still really being built out. And the big approach from a NiCE perspective is, how do we provide capability? 2 Degrees is going down this path as well. They've spent a lot of time bringing together, as I said, 9 different knowledge bases across their organization into a single knowledge base within Expert. What that's then allowed them to do is actually massively simplify what they have, right? As an agent, you've got, 5, 6, 7 different places to go and look for answers to things. You have to be able to effectively navigate that. You have to know what question you're asking. You have to be able to understand what you're reading, and all the while the customer's on your phone, and it's driving up your non-talk time or your hold time, right? You might have a hold time of 30 seconds on average per call that you have to try to hit, but that customer's been on the phone for 3 minutes on hold while you look for an answer, or maybe you have to go to your back end support, right? So we see this driving a lot of stress and anxiety for agents. And so being able to give them just easier access to answers, just providing them with a little bit of a ChatGPT-like interface to knowledge, to ask questions to get answers as they're on the phone. Then we start to look at how do we automate that through agent assist applications, which is where 2 Degrees is heading now. And that really starts to drive down the amount of use, the amount of stress, and the amount of time spent on hold and on calls to resolve inquiries. So that's a big focus, right? That's ultimately why 2 Degrees chose to partner with NiCE. They are one of our best customers in region. We're very happy, very lucky to work alongside them. But what I did want to make sure that I covered for everybody on this call is, well, like, what's in it for you as an organization? What has 2 Degrees seen as far as the value from this whole transformation approach, and maybe what you could expect to see if you went down this path? So they moved from 2 different disconnected platforms. They navigated through a merger. They finally chose CX1 to be their contact center as a service. Day one, post-delivery, they saw some great results, right? They saw almost 90% improvement in response time for emails. Yes, they still use email. It's a very important channel for them. They saw, 44% improvement in service levels, and, almost 40% improvement in speed to answer. So all of those are great metrics for any organization to build a business case and to look at how they can improve efficiency. Over time, though, in the last 12 months, they've been adopting more and more AI capability and more automation where it's appropriate. And as I mentioned at the outset, they were the first organization in APAC to adopt auto summarization. When it first launched, they rated it about a 6 out of 10. And their current agent notes, were maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10 as far as like clarity and usefulness. When they started to leverage the new generative AI version using large language models, which is if you signed up to that now, that's what you would be getting. They now have a 98% acceptance rate for the post-call summaries, right? Now, that's all well and good, Ben. What does that mean? So on average, it's about 120-second of AHT reduction, 25% reduction in AHT and ACW. And through their knowledge journey as well, through the pilot that they've run, and now they're rolling this out to production, a 60-second drop in AHT by using AI-powered knowledge. So that is a huge amount of savings. And if you ask Wayne, this is something that he explained at our recent interactions event in London, is if they wanted to, if they removed all of this capability and they wanted to handle the same amount of contacts, they would need an additional 50 agents right? So they've not removed anyone out of their contact center, but these capabilities have allowed 2degrees to do the additional work of 50 extra agents without having to add a single headcount, which is just incredible. So, for me, that's really where the ROI is here. And these are not huge swings, right? This is better post-call automated summaries and better access to knowledge, right? There will be other things that will bring value, such as, conversational AI and agentic AI and all those other things. But if we're building business cases and we're looking at how we transform summarization, auto summarization using auto summary, it's a passive capability, right? It's something that just sits in the background, does its job, and passes on the value. So, again, this is where we would look at how do we start small and how do we build a business case before we go for those really big, big swings like a chatbot or a voice AI that changes the way that customers engage with organizations. So I've got a few more slides, Fran, but I'm happy to pause there. And I can
We've got a
absolutely
few
share these.
questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've got a couple of questions and super relevant to what you've just been talking about. Corey's asked the question here, and it's specifically about the automation taking away some of that sort of administrative component. How can organisations better prepare team members for AI change to boost productivity or efficiency? So, for example, an organisation implements auto call summarisation with a goal to reduce time, admin time specifically, and AHT. But from a staff member's perspective, they might see that as a negative, as ultimately they'll then take more calls because there's less time in between it. So that cycle of what's in it for me. So how can organisations better prepare teams for this type of change? Great question, Corey, by the way.
Question, Corey. That's a contender for a gift card for sure. So we've actually experienced this, right? So we've seen when we first implemented auto summary at 2degrees, once they started trusting the summarization and they saw that it was performing, a great job, it was consistent, it was capturing everything that needed to be captured. Agents were sitting back and just, letting their after call work time out, right? And then they were losing the summary because it would time out and move on to the next call. And that kind of talks to the fact that, agents were trusting the summarization so much that they felt they could sit back for a minute in between calls and get away with it. We've solved that problem now from a technical perspective, but what they did do was provide the ability for those agents to get an extra break, right? So it may not be, if agents are using after call work to get a bit of a breather, as an organization, we should probably look at that and say, well, do we maybe just need to give our agents an extra breather, right? Rather than tacking it on after every call, why don't we just give them an extra 5 or 10-minute break if we're saving the right amount of time through things like auto summarization or agent assist? The other thing I would say is it's also about the way that you as a technology team or a business team within the organization that owns contact center as a product or capability is the agents shouldn't be responsible for the accuracy of the summary, right? If we're using AI and we're using large language models, the team that owns the contact center capability should be responsible for the accuracy of the summary. So Wayne actually said to the team, if your summary is incorrect, that's not your fault, that's my fault, right? Because through additional prompting and testing, which we can all do we can do all of that within the platform, we can improve the accuracy, right? And we can improve the output of the summary. The other point I will say is that if there is a data point that we're asking agents to capture through a summarization or a note that is available through another platform like a CRM, let it sit in the CRM. We don't need to double up, right? So if we know that the customer has been identified because we identify every single customer, we don't need to have that in the note. If we know that they've got a payment plan, right, because it's flagged in the CRM, we don't need that in the note, right? So let's keep the customer record in the customer record management platform, and let's use the note for what actually occurred on the call. Because I see that
goes back to what you said before, though, right?
Yeah.
Make sure your processes are reviewed in line with the modern operation of your organization in the contact center. If the system tells you check their ID, let that be enough.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
No, but great question, Corey. Really good question.
Yep. Just a quick one here from Ashley. Time for 2 degrees benefits. What was their journey period before they started getting some of those ROIs?
Yeah, so theirs is an interesting one, right? Because they adopted it so early in the product life cycle of the existence of that product. It probably took them about 6 months.
That's
Nowadays,
actually pretty short, really.
it is pretty
Still,
short, but it's faster now, right? So,
yeah,
we are running a like a 60-day $0 trial for auto summary right now for our customers, and we think that that's more than enough time to prove the value of auto summary for a small group of agents. What I will say, and what we've experienced through 2 degrees is, as a new capability gets adopted, right, and you have to build that trust with the agents. We did
yeah,
see a slight spike in AHT initially as they were checking everything and making sure it was working well, just
yeah.
that extra fine-tooth comb. But then after it was becoming trusted, it dropped dramatically. So it might be a little bit of a kick up and then a dramatic drop after that. So, within 3 months, I would say.
I like that. So this question here from Jennifer, referring back to the prediction by Gartner, which is based on the fact that AI currently isn't capable of providing that humanized interaction.
Mm.
What happens when that technology does improve? Do you think it's possible for the AI interactions to be more humanized?
Humanized, yes. But as somebody who enjoys philosophy, empathy, no.
Yeah,
Right. So, as good as LLMs will get at sounding like humans, um, they won't have that same experience, right? As you and I do. They won't have the ability to really connect on like an emotional level and understand the complexity of your first baby, or getting a mortgage for the first time and the excitement that comes along with that, right? It will synthesize that, but it won't really be able to understand it and sort of guide you through that journey. I am a firm believer, even though my title has automation and AI all over it, I am a firm believer that AI should have a human quality to it at all times. And what I mean by that is humans have to be in the loop, right? We want
yeah.
to automate things that should be automated. And it's no longer a technology issue or a physics issue, right? The AI can basically do whatever we want it to do nowadays. It becomes a business choice. So is this a transactional engagement that we're really happy for AI to manage and that we don't really care about having a human involved in? Direct debit detail change, address change, maybe I want to raise a ticket, blah, blah, blah. Or is this a relationship or a relational style of intent where we as a business are choosing humans to want to be interfacing there, right? So to your point, and I don't know who asked that question. Apologies, I've missed the name.
Jennifer.
Jennifer. I think it will come down to choice, right? If your organization wants to be an organization that uses AI for everything, that's your choice. But I do think it will start to be a conversation not about what the technology can do, but what we as organizations want the AI to do and what we want humans to do. It's not going to be
And
it's not going to
the
be an issue on the technology. Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the other really important stakeholder is the customer. What does the customer expect and want within that interaction as well?
And how do we
As
find
far
out
as
what
a
customers want?
long, correct.
Through the transcripts and through the
It's
through the
all
recording.
connected, right? All
It is.
connected. Another couple of quickies for companies that have multiple sources of data, ranging from legacy systems to all the new systems, which is many, all of them some of that data. What tips would you give in terms of finding a starting point to building a solid foundation for finding customer-centric insights?
Well, I mean, the insights that you get, I mean, it depends, right? I mean, I'm going to try to give a broad answer, but obviously every business is very
Yeah,
different. Start with your call recordings and your transcripts, right? I can't stress that enough. Every piece of data that we capture in every other system is usually distilled from something else, right? So if we've got, flags against customers for late payments or, credit issues or positive things like, they're a great customer, they're a premium this, they're a premium that, they're a gold this, platinum, whatever it might be, all of that is coming from other signals from elsewhere, right? So depending on how advanced your organization is, of course, if you've got access to old recordings and you can transcribe them and start to run analysis on those and really understand, your intents, your actions, your outcomes, your top level categories, your subcategories, and your subcategories, and then really understanding sort of how all those things interplay with each other. That gives you a really good map, what we call it an ontology or a data structure, gives you a really good map of what people are actually contacting you about. So do you know that? That's my first question is, do you know why your customers are contacting you? If you can't answer that question, that's the place to start. If you can answer that question, then you start to filter it out by, well, what's the number one thing they contact us about? And is that something that we could potentially look to self-serve, or could we augment the agents that do that? And is there a process that potentially we could look at improving there, right? If it's something that's 20% of our calls is about billing inquiries, could we do a better job at explaining bill shock to our customers upfront proactively, right? Because we know that that's what they're contacting us about. So if you can't answer the question of why are your customers contacting you, it becomes very difficult to pull insights out of other systems, right? Because you need context to really understand the perspective of what the other systems are telling you. And to me, the ground truth of any business is what your customers are saying to you on the phone.
Yeah. And whether we're listening.
Or
One
on the
really,
messaging conversation or email, of course.
yeah, on whatever it is, whatever channel.
Yes.
No, you're right. One last one. I'm mindful of time.
Very good.
I know everybody is busy. When implementing, this is from Ben, when implementing AI in a contact center, what are the most common mistakes? Oh my God, this is the big ball of string for you, Ben. What are the most common mistakes that lead to increased agent frustration instead of reducing it? Good question.
That
Such
is a
good
great question. I will try to answer this as quickly and as succinctly as possible. The number one thing to get right when it comes to implementing AI for agents, internal facing AI, is making sure that whatever knowledge it has access to is up to date and correct, right? As soon, summarization is a different story, right? It happens after the call.
Yep.
So, if there's a big mistake in it, you can update that and change it. But if you're relying on a real-time knowledge guidance or, knowledge generation or anything that's related to knowledge, and you haven't done the work to structure your information architecture and curate and manage your knowledge base and really make sure that that knowledge is up to date, correct, and, in the right places, and you try to put that in front of agents and it starts giving wrong answers, guess what? They're not going to trust it. So 100% start with knowledge as the foundation. Even giving them access to just a better knowledge base that's easier to navigate, it will do wonders for your agents. Once you start then relying on real-time utterances and prompting and, retrieval augmented generation and all the great AI stuff that goes along with it, that's fine. But really all that's doing is shortening the pipeline between what the customer asks and what the system provides. If that knowledge is incorrect or takes too long to provide a response, agents aren't going to trust it. They're going to ignore it. And it's not going to provide the, the success that you want. So getting that right and speaking to agents about their feedback, starting really, really small, right? Start with 5 agents, start with 2 agents, start with a small group, get their feedback, take it seriously and start expanding from there.
Love that. Ben, as always, I could talk about this stuff with you for a lot longer than 1 hour. Great session today. Thank you, everybody. And apologies for going a little bit over, but some fantastic conversation and great questions. Ben, till next time. We'll talk again soon. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Bye now.